Is the Board of County Commissioners Board work session. It is Thursday, June 9th, 2022. It is 9:04 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, Room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. Vice Chair Ty Menser in the boardroom, and Commissioner Gary Edwards joining me via Zoom. County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell in the boardroom. And today we have a guest with us. It's Prosecutor John Thunheim, who's joining us in the boardroom as well. On today's agenda, it's the Prosecuting Attorney's Office backlog efforts and other challenges. So who am I handing this off to? Am I handing it off?
Directly to the prosecutor. Go ahead, John.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and the commissioners who are both present and on virtual. I appreciate it. I will say that I think this is going to feel like a much less formal presentation than what I did a few months ago when I came in to give you kind of a state of the prosecutor's office. And I'll just say by way of background that in conversations that I've had with the county manager over the last year or so, he was encouraging me, and I think all the other elected officials, to try to schedule times with the board to just check in, right? To just kind of let you all know how it's going. And so I kicked that off with the State of the Prosecutor presentation that I did a few months ago to kind of give you all a baseline of what was going on. But my goal here is to schedule a little bit of time every 2-3 months, something like that, just to check in, give you a status report, give you a chance to ask me questions, and to just have a conversation. So that's my goal. I don't have a formal slideshow or anything like that today. I just thought I'd give you some highlights about what is going on in our shop, some of the things we're dealing with, but some of the positive things that are going as well. And hopefully there'll be plenty of time for any kind of discussion, and I absolutely would welcome that and questions for sure. So let me start off by saying that things in the criminal justice system overall, in my opinion, are slowly starting to move forward from where we were during pandemic, when basically everything was just kind of stopped, right? We were basically just trying to manage everything that was coming in, but we couldn't do jury trials. And so there was a lot of cases coming in, but not as many cases going out because they were not resolving. That is slowly starting to get back to, I won't say normal, back to normal, but it's starting to get back to at least moving some cases through. I'm sure you may have seen there was some media coverage. I personally tried a aggravated murder case earlier this year. It took 6 weeks of trial time. It was a fairly complex case, many witnesses, with a successful result, at least from the prosecution standpoint. And but there was an additional, probably at least 8 weeks of intense preparation prior to that trial, and then a lot of time invested before that, just getting things, just managing that case and getting it up. So the reason I just bring that up is to give you a sense of that we're trying to move some of these really high priority cases through, but they are extremely time intensive. So as we start going, that's the issue that is really one of the biggest challenges that will be facing as we start this up again, and that is that now this workload that has accumulated during the pandemic from the inability to do trials and to charge cases and things like that, now we've got to start digging into that. That's the whole backlog effort, right? And the work there is daunting, to say the least. But that being said, we have now been trying jury trials fairly regularly since we started that The aggravated murder case that I tried was one of the first to go out after the restrictions were lifted this year. And we have been in trial pretty regularly throughout the time to present. We just finished another one yesterday, a jury trial. And again, talking from the prosecutor's standpoint, if it seems like our ability to try cases is still there, we're able to, get the witnesses we need and so forth to prove the cases. We're prevailing at trial for the most part, and we've had challenges in doing that. But I'm optimistic to say that it feels like we're getting back to a place now where we can get this system kind of reinvigorated, for lack of a better word. And we have started to dig into the virtual pile of cases that accumulated during the pandemic that we could not even charge because our sole focus was only on charging violent cases, because that's the only cases we could really process during the pandemic. We were focused only on cases where people were in custody for obvious reasons, because we were trying very hard to make sure that jail population was managed accordingly. And so the referrals that we were getting were somebody either wasn't arrested or they were released because they weren't perceived to be a threat to the community, and the judge looked at it and decided that they were able to be released. A lot of those we just had to set aside so we could focus on those. We're starting to move our attention back to those cases and doing it in somewhat of a triage fashion. So we're
excuse me, John.
Yeah.
John?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
About quite often when you're talking, it goes completely blank, and I don't know if Commissioner Mejia is experiencing the same thing.
I think your feed also is breaking out, Commissioner.
Commissioner Edwards, yeah, your feed is breaking up.
Okay, the county manager. And now your picture froze up too. So, okay, just some kind of an overload, I suppose, but I just want to let you know that.
Yeah, I think your connection may have some issues, Commissioner.
Okay, I'll try something else. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Commissioner. I hope that we're able to repair that.
Can we do, I'm sorry, John, one sec. Can we do the call-in line for Commissioner Edwards? Is that possible?
It will take us time to set up the phone, because you can certainly call my cell phone and we can have that way.
Commissioner Edwards, would you like to do that?
Yes, and I'll call Romero's cell phone because I'm losing about half of what's.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and I'll put you my phone next to John, so you can
Get out of this one.
Yep.
Yes.
And I'll dial in.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
When my screen starts freezing, that usually means I gotta get out and come back into the meeting. It doesn't usually resolve itself. Once you get that screen freeze in and out, it's just,
Sometimes resetting it helps, yeah.
yeah, I just get out of the meeting and come click the link again. It's just magically better. Maybe that's what you did.
Jeez, it's not me.
Hello.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can. It bounced over to your answering machine, just so you know. So, okay, I'm good now, though.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, Commissioner?
I certainly can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm gonna do my best to use my courtroom voice so that everybody hears.
Outside voice. Good.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So what I was starting to talk about was that we are able to now start at least reviewing some of those backlog cases. Although progress is slow, but we are starting in on it in kind of a triage fashion. So we're looking at older cases first to make sure we're not running into statute of limitations bars, and trying very hard if there's a upcoming lingering statute of limitations or some other issue with the case, trying hard to take action on that case one way or the other, either charge it and get it moving, try to do some other resolution if that's a possibility, or if it's not no longer a provable case, getting it out of our system. And so we're just basically starting that process now. And so I thought I'd give you some quick numbers. If I were you, I would not worry about the precise numbers, but I want to give you just an idea of what that volume looks like in rough numbers. I got some fresh numbers yesterday. So in our felony practice, so that includes our general felony, special victims, and domestic violence units. So these are primarily, almost exclusively cases in Superior Court or headed to Superior Court. We've got about 1,750 referrals. So these are cases that are needing review and a charging decision, so they're uncharged pending referrals. There is good news in that, because if you remember a few months ago when I was here, I had roughly the same number. And so what that tells me is that we're actually getting to that point now where we're able to keep up with what's coming in. Yes, right? We're treading water. That's a great metaphor. It's not going up. It's not necessarily going down that quickly yet, but at least we're managing. We have right now about a little over 800 charged cases pending trial. Those in our system, they're considered open charge cases. That's the category. And we have just over 170 cases actively in a diversion program or a treatment court. So that it gives you a sense of, what that caseload looks like. And what I look for when I look at those numbers is to make sure that it feels like there's balance there, in the sense that we do have a good number of cases in the diversion programs, in the treatment programs. We are managing the trial caseload, although over 800 is more than what I would like.
These all felonies you're talking
Those
about?
are all felony cases and or referrals.
Can
Yes.
I ask how the numbers that you just gave us compared to the pre-pandemic times?
So pre-pandemic, we would carry, without having looked at numbers, I would be a little bit cautious on quoting precise numbers, but we would usually carry maybe about 200 to 300 pending referrals at any time if you spread it out throughout all the deputy prosecutors who were actively reviewing cases at the time. That's again a very rough estimate. So significant, obviously, increase from the pandemic, which we knew, right? Because we basically just had to stop reviewing and processing all of those cases that came in that weren't high priority. And that's pretty much determined, again, by the level of charge and the violence and so forth involved in the case. Excuse me. For misdemeanors, we have right now a little over 500 pending referrals. That's significantly less than the felony referrals, and I don't know if that strikes anybody as a surprise. It doesn't me, because, and I think I've explained this in prior meetings, misdemeanors oftentimes are charged by citation from the law enforcement officer directly. So those cases just directly go into the court. We're not making a charging decision one way or the other. A little over 500. So that's why that would be a significantly lower number. But the counter number is here. We have a little over 2,300 cases active in court set for trial, or pending trial, I should say, not necessarily set for trial, but pending trial. So you see how the differences in the courts with those numbers, right? The district court has a considerably higher number of cases that are actively in the court system because those are going directly in from law enforcement. We do have a little over 180 misdemeanor cases, again, in a diversion or a treatment court program. So those are actually pretty close numbers, felony to misdemeanor. The bulk of our misdemeanor caseload, just to remind everybody, is impaired drivers and domestic violence. There are other kinds of cases, of course, but if you were going to look at the numbers, those would be the most significant caseload drivers for that court. And then finally, in our juvenile court, we have a little over 180 pending juvenile referrals. And unfortunately, I'm not sure I could tell you what that number was pre-pandemic. It wasn't a significant enough number that I ever actually tracked it or watched it, because we were usually able to act on juvenile cases relatively quickly. So that does, either way, it's a marked increase, and again, it's a result of pandemic shutdowns in the courts. But we have just in the last couple of months, according to my juvenile team leader, triaged about 100 of those referrals. So we're actually gaining ground in that area. We have 29 cases open and set for trial, and 43 cases in active diversion or treatment program. I expect as we continue to go through the pending referrals, both of those numbers will go up. Juvenile has a mandatory diversion for certain cases, and so our diversion numbers will probably go up. Again, I don't put that out there to have precise data points for you. What I'm trying to do is just give you a kind of a scope of what we're dealing with in terms of workload. And so that's the biggest challenge, as I alluded to, that we're really dealing with, is that for the deputy prosecutors in particular, is that now that things are opening up, we actually are having to deal with all this work of this backlog, and it's daunting. And so in all honesty, I'm seeing a lot of indicators of stress in the office with the deputy prosecutors. We're trying very hard to make sure people are taking care of themselves, trying to give people opportunities to get time out. The deputies, when they're working, are often working evenings, weekends, particularly if they're preparing for a trial. And so when they are able to take time off, we're trying to really encourage them to just, cut the cord, if you will, and really take care of themselves. Some are better at that than others, but there is a rising stress level in the organization, and I can just feel it. It's palpable, and frankly, it's palpable at all levels. It's not just the line deputies, but the supervisors, the managers. Everybody's feeling it, and so that will be, I'm sure, a topic of future conversation as we continue to work through this. The other challenge that we're having, honestly, is recruitment. And after talking to my colleagues across the state, I'm somewhat relieved to know that we're not alone in that arena. Every prosecutor in the state, generally every prosecutor in the state is saying the same thing. We're having a very difficult time recruiting and hiring lawyers, and we had a long discussion about why that is. The labor market is changing, and the legal labor market is changing. There's a lot more lawyers that are going into private practice and not doing public service law. I've had conversations with Patrick O'Connor, my counterpart at the Public Defender's Office. He's experiencing similar struggles in recruiting and hiring. And so there's just this decline in, for whatever reason, lawyers coming out of law school that are looking for public service opportunities. So our strategy for that is we're trying to advertise more aggressively. We're trying to build stronger connections to the law schools. We have a very robust internship program. We're still really trying to keep that going. We just hired one of our interns who hopefully will be starting with us in August after she takes the bar exam. So, you know, we're working on this. What's happening is, though, it's taking longer to get good, talented applicants. And then when we do, we find it takes a little longer to actually get them on board because they're usually leaving something or they're moving here from another state or another place. So the next two lawyers that we just hired, one is starting in August, as I said, pending bar examination results. And then that's a conditional offer, obviously. And then we just hired a lawyer who's moving here from Alaska, who's a prosecutor up there, and will be starting with us in September. But she's got to move her family here, and she's got a child starting college, and so we had to give her some time there, and that's not unusual. And so for that reason, I still have ARPA positions, the project positions, that I'm still working on filling because we just have not been able to recruit in the same way. It's a really difficult time across the state in the labor market for hiring lawyers into the public sector. And the final thing I just wanted to give you an update on is just a couple of projects that we are working on in the office that I'm actually very excited about, just to kind of end my part of this on a hopeful note and let you all know that, and the folks that are watching know that despite all these challenges, we are doing some incredibly good work in our office. One is we have retained a local trainer, diversity, equity, inclusion trainer, who is well known in the community. And we worked with him for him to create a kind of a customized DEI training for our office. About a year and a half ago, I established in the office we called it our Equity and Justice Work Group. And it's an internal work group of people across the office. So deputy prosecutors, support staff, victim advocates, everybody, we have representation from all the different parts of the office come together into this work group. And this was one of the things that they came back and said, here's something we're recommending you do. They were the ones that went out and worked with the trainer to develop the curriculum. And now we're in the process of currently all of the prosecuting attorney's office's employees, lawyers, staff, everybody going through a 4-part series of DEI training. It's good for the lawyers because we're actually hoping that the state bar will grant us continuing legal education credit for it. The bar now requires lawyers to have a certain number of DEI as part of their ethics training, and so we're going to try to see if we can make that work into our program. And I'm attending those myself as well, and I have found them so far to be incredibly valuable and insightful. And I've done several DEI trainings over the last few years, and this is really a good one. So I'm actually very excited about what's happening there in our shop. And then the final thing, which I know you all have heard about and been talking about, but it's one of those projects that come in that just kind of really energizes you. And that is our data dashboard project. We were awarded a federal justice grant, Department of Justice grant, under a program called Smart Prosecution, to build out these data dashboards that by the end of the project, the goal is to have those public facing so the community, it adds transparency, the community can see what the workload looks like and what we're doing. And there's a process that we're going to go through to do that. That also includes some community engagement, building a community advisory board to help us decide, what data we're going to look at, how we're going to communicate that to the public. And so it's about a 2-year process. We are in negotiation right now. I say that we use the word negotiation, it's really just about scoping out the work with an organization called Measures for Justice, which specializes in this kind of work. They created a series of dashboards like what we're looking for in Yolo County, California. And if anybody ever wants to look at kind of what our vision is, they could Google Yolo County, California. I think it's DA's office. They're a district attorney system. But in any event, those are easy to find on the web. And it might give people a picture of what these dashboards could look like for us. We are at the status of that right now is that we are in the process of scoping out that contract. We have requested I think everybody here knows the language, but it's a sole source exception from the federal government so that we don't have to go through the bidding process as a requirement of the grant. We actually expect that to be coming through soon. And we haven't had any concerns that won't be granted. Nothing's come to us that said that that's a problem. And I give you that to alert you that we'll be probably making a similar request to the board, either an exception or sole source request in terms of finalizing that contract with this organization because of the expertise that they have. It really does kind of fit the intent of sole source because they have this very specific expertise that they bring to the table and they have experience in doing it. And so, but that'll be a specific discussion when we get to that point. That's really just a heads up for you all to know where we're at. So once we have that contract and we're ready to move forward on the contract, we'll be talking more about that with you. Once that contract is finalized, then we'll be starting to go through the public process of building out these dashboards. The vision, as I said, is to create public-facing data dashboards to give the community better understanding of what we do, what our workload is like, and what the outcomes of that are. The project, the big picture term for the project is community engagement through data. That's kind of the mantra of the project. So that is something that I think we are all very excited about. Even the deputy prosecutors are incredibly interested in, for themselves, even better understanding this aggregate picture of the work in the office. So with that, I'm ready to open up for questions, conversation, comments, feedback, whatever you want to throw at me.
County manager.
Yes, sir. You can put.
I can't raise my hand.
No, go. I'll help you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. John, by any chance, have you utilized any bonus process for recruitment or retention, and possibly ARPA money that you haven't spent yet could be maybe utilized that way? I mean, that's kind of a question for yourself and county manager. And then on the DEI issue, is there any reason that you couldn't use our county DEI trainer that Nicole seems to be doing a great job?
Yeah, we actually started this, I'll answer the second question first. We started our process before Nicole was on board and really working on this. And so I didn't want to change course too quickly. And we had already worked with this, with the trainer. And so I felt like I didn't want to change when I was already, down the road a ways. I didn't want to change to that. But we've been talking with Nicole throughout this. I can tell you she's very excited at what we were doing. And so she's been very supportive of us and of this training. On the other question, I have not looked at that. There are some implications in that with regard to our collective bargaining agreement with the deputy prosecutors. We are a union shop in that regard. And I don't know the implications of using ARPA money to hire in that, using it in that way for hiring. I'm open to that conversation, and so maybe that's something I can explore with the county manager and with Robin and others if we continue to have these hurdles. I think that's a very interesting idea, personally.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, are you listening? Do you hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, my turn? Okay, so a couple of questions just kind of scattered around. One of them is about, might even be for Robin, you know, the money to support the effort to clear the backlog. Now, it sounds like you're having trouble filling spots to do that, but I'm just wondering, I guess I have two-pronged question. One is, how are you managing that within your staff? Now that your staff was doing whatever they were doing, I'm sure they were busy before you got to the point of being able to, so you talked about you're actively engaged in these review of these 750. So who's doing that work? Are they just piled on the same people, or I know we fund, and then that segues to the money part. We had an $8 million bucket to clear this. The board only authorized, I think, $1 million, and different groups were gonna submit, and then, but you know, and we might not need 8 million, but I was pretty sure we're gonna need more than 1 million. I'm just wondering where that whole money sits in terms of the backlog bucket that we set aside. So that's kind of a set of questions I'm curious about.
Okay, well, from my side of it, I think if you dug into the numbers there, you would actually find our ARPA expenditure relatively low right now because of that. We have the positions, we're recruiting for them, and you know, when we can get to the point of filling those positions, then that money is attached to those positions, and those expenditures will start happening. And so that is kind of the interesting thing here, is that the issue for us is not a shortage of ARPA funding. It's a inability to spend it right now because I don't have the staff capacity. And I want to be careful and reiterate that when I say we're starting to triage, we are only starting to triage, right? So that's the answer to your first question, is that yes, I do have a couple of existing lawyers that have started looking at this, and some of it has been taken on by the manager. So Christy Peters, my chief of staff, she's been reviewing a number of the older cases herself, just to, again, try to, you know, make sure we don't have statute of limitations issues coming up on cases, and trying to really prioritize that. And then the supervisor of my felony team is the other person that's starting to look at that. And we're slowly distributing cases out to the other felony deputies to start looking at it. But we're doing that, you know, we've just barely turned the faucet on so as to not overwhelm them. So it's not like we picked up all 1,700 and started looking at them, right? We're looking at a small portion, and I think that's why we're treading water. The amount that's coming in the amount of water going down the drain is the same as the amount coming in now, but the water level's not changing.
So how are the other law and justice partners doing with respect to accessing that $1 million? Are they having the same thing? They're not spending it very fast because they can't staff, or is one of the groups using more than we thought, or how's that all shaking?
I know the public defense is having issues as well. So they probably, public defense is in the same position as the prosecutor's office. Also the Superior Court, I think, it does hire the clerk manager to help on the backlog. And so you will see some expenditures moving forward. The clerk's office, I don't believe they have been able to be successful in hiring. So I
Same
don't.
story.
I believe the same story, and we have periodic meetings. I think that the next meeting is coming up in a couple of weeks, where we go through the process, all the partners related to the backlog, and see where we are. Because you're right, Commissioner, set aside $8 million, the board released $1 million, that was how we communicated, and how, the partners submitted a proposal as to how they can start working on the backlog. But I think I'm myself waiting for the time to say, okay, now we need more.
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of waiting for
and
myself.
I don't think we're there yet.
We're not there yet,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So I can tell you that through the end of May, for decrease the court backlog, we have spent just under $123,000, $123,000, and that includes monthly rent at Chandler Court.
Wow, so
So
nobody got hired, basically,
Yeah.
because even one
Yeah.
person would take up.
Well, and in all fairness, we're the start of the process, right, for those uncharged cases. So Patrick doesn't have work for his lawyers until we do our work, because that's the way the cases flow.
Yeah.
Superior Court's funding was a little different though, because what they were gearing up for was the increase in jury trials, and that has started to increase. So I think that's why they decided they could go forward with their hiring, because the jury trials are happening. District Court, I just want to make a quick comment, because Patrick and I just had a conversation yesterday or the day before, that because the District Court caseload is in the court, right? There's not this big backlog of uncharged cases. like
Because
there is
law
in Superior
enforcement
Court.
sites.
Exactly.
Okay.
And trials are starting in District Court. That pressure is growing actually more quickly than even in Superior Court. And I think he's thinking about either requesting more or diverting some of his Superior Court to District Court. I'm looking at the same thing. He interestingly enough, when we were talking, he said that his District Court defense lawyers are now carrying an active open caseload of about 200 cases per lawyer. I've never done defense work, so I don't know what that number sounds like. You've done defense work. But then it caused me to look at the numbers in my shop, and the numbers that the prosecutors are carrying exceed 500 right now, open cases. So we're very much in the same boat in terms of caseload in that court. And it's because of the fact that those cases go directly into the court system, that we don't have the ability to regulate like we do in Superior Court.
Related to District Court, did not request any FTEs as in relation to the backlog as part of the $1 million. There is none. But they are contemplating, I believe, making that request here shortly. So just to give you a perspective on that.
yet another aspect of funding for the backlog is that the administrator of the courts has a very small amount of funding. And in talking to their finance administrator, Thurston County, I have to look at how much. I think Chris told me to send him a bill for like $100,000 for the court administrator to put toward the backlog. So there is some state funding, so that'll offset what we have to spend of our ARPA money. But it's just the costs are trickling because of your inability to fill the positions.
One other question, and then I'll pass it to the chair. On your data, so, I've been to a Measures for Justice presentation, and I know why you're excited about that. It's a really cool project. But I'm just curious how you see, so at the same time, we've got, the Law and Justice Council was trying to figure out how do we aggregate, all of our law enforcement data. And now the board just got presented with an MOU that the sheriff's joining this consortium, and they're gonna work on a software system that will be across Thurston County. And that seems like, I'm just wondering, can we plug that into what you're doing? Are you guys working on that? Or is there some way to make this all, supersize it with all these efforts?
Yeah, we're actually having that very conversation. So Leah Landon, your criminal justice coordinator, has pulled together a group that's, she's calling it a data work group. And we actually had that very conversation, is that, we have this project that's specifically focused on this. And one of the things about the prosecutor's office that makes us, I think, a good place to have this project is we are kind of a hub that connects those pieces together that you're talking about, right? So we are a connection to law enforcement and their data. A lot of the data that we would look at from them would also be us. So the number of referrals, for instance, that they're making, the number of cases that are coming in, that kind of thing. And then we're connected to all the courts, right? So we have a connection to District Court, we have a connection to Superior Court, we have connection to Department of Corrections. So in some ways, it's a good fit for us to be in the place that we are. So that's what we're talking about is, as we look at this, I think we gotta be careful not to bite off more than we can chew, right? So we start kind of with an initial vision of what dashboards we want to create, and that's what the public process will be very much focused on, is helping us make those kinds of decisions and getting a lot of community involvement in that. And then perhaps from that, we start to, add on as we gain experience. But I could see, in terms of the grand vision of this, I could see these data dashboards becoming more expansive to include law enforcement, to include other areas of the system. I think that's a real, not just possibility, I think that's a vision that we should embrace. There was one other thing I was gonna say about that. On the law enforcement system, I just wanna put in a couple of words of support for that. From the prosecutor standpoint. Like I said, we're connected to every law enforcement agency in the county, right? Because we're getting referrals from them. The cities have been on the same system for many years. And so every report we get from them is standardized. We can input those into our system. And everything is, the same. That's a huge help for us. And the data's all the same, right? So an apple in Yelm is the same as an apple in Lacey and Olympia and Tumwater, right? But the county had adopted its new system before they did this and wasn't in a position to partner at that particular time. I think that Sheriff Kimball was sheriff at that time, and we just weren't in a financial position to do that, right? And so the county has always been the outlier. The reports are different, the data is sometimes different. So with this opportunity now, with the cities, they are in the process of obtaining a new system. And they invited the sheriff to come in now, and so we can all be on the same one. I am so 100% more in support of that. If we could get all of our law enforcement on the same case management system, record management system is what they call it, RMS, that would be cool for a variety of reasons, not just for data, but just for consistency in terms of our workflow and how the work comes into us. That's my 2 cents on that.
We gave a thumbs up last week, so we're with you.
Nice. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. This week.
I'm really, really glad to hear that. Yeah.
Thank you. My questions are in regards to the numbers you gave us in the treatment courts, where you said there were 170 cases. And I'm wondering, is that treatment courts at their max capacity? Is there more capacity for them, and how is that established?
Yeah, thank you for letting me clarify, because the 174 cases is not just treatment court, right? I said diversion or treatment court. So some of that is the pretrial services diversion programs that we have of that. Some of that would be our diversion program through Friendship Diversions, which is the nonprofit that we partner with to do certain types of diversions for us. The treatment courts right now are bouncing back. They took a significant hit during pandemic, and then also Blake had some impact. The decision that stopped prosecutions for unlawful possession of a controlled substance, that had some impact, not huge impact, but some. So my understanding is we're bouncing back, but we've got capacity left there, and it's something that we're going to be really trying to get back to where we were. And I think that's true, and I think that I'll just say that I think that's also true in mental health court and veterans court in the district courts, and with the same intention to try to now, divert cases over there as much as we can.
Okay, that's great to hear. And then, the backlog, there's many things that affect, right? And so what's been the sentiment from victims of crimes, as they've been kind of waiting, for their cases to go in front of a judge. And I know you requested an additional victim advocate this last budget cycle. So I'm just wondering what's been kind of the sentiment of that, and what has your office heard and all of those terms?
Yeah, I would say, and this is very general, obviously, because, you know, every victim's input is individualized to their case. But if I was gonna generally summarize it, I think what I would say is frustration, but understanding. I mean, I think most understand that this was something really not within anybody's control, right? The courts shut down, that was a pandemic, that wasn't in anybody's control. But there is this frustration because now the cases have been sitting there for some instances 2 and maybe even a little longer than 2 years without any progress whatsoever. And so that added victim advocacy capacity was basically to try to help us be responsive to those needs. And we are also using victim impact and input in terms of our triage process, right? So if a victim calls in and there's something going on with them that, you know, is adds priority to the case for whatever reason, we'll take that into consideration in our triage process. And sometimes maybe we'll pull their case out of order and move it up a little bit because of something that's going on in their life or something that needs, causes us to want to take action quicker.
And can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Of
So
course.
how is that affecting your dismissal rate in terms of maybe victims moving on or moving to a different place or not being able to be in touch with them? Has your dismissal rate gone up because of, you know, these 2 years where you've just been on this kind of holding pattern?
I think in terms of looking at numbers, I'm gonna have to come back to you on that. It's something that I can look at. My sense is the dismissal rate, if you will, was pretty level during pandemic because everything was just kind of, you know, static, right? We put a couple of things into place in our business process as we've come out of pandemic to try to identify cases where a victim has moved or is gone, or that and thus we won't be able to prove it at trial, and to act on those cases as soon as we can to get them out of the system. And generally that could be, that one way that could be as a dismissal. So I wouldn't be surprised if the dismissal rate has popped up a little bit. It hasn't popped up enough that it has reached me in terms of any kind of alarm. And we have, as I said, we've gone to trial now on a number of cases. A couple of those cases were, at least one I know of was pre-pandemic. It was actually charged just before the pandemic. And we were able to go to trial on that case. So I haven't noticed an alarming increase in the number of dismissals, but let me run some numbers and come back with you, come back with that for you.
Great. And then my last question is in terms of family juvenile court, since you do have an office over there, and I was wondering, has your office over there had any impact at all because of COVID, and what do those numbers look like?
So the juvenile caseload had been dropping historically, even pre-pandemic, to the point now where really I have only one full-time deputy prosecutor that is working in the juvenile system with a pretty manageable caseload. Little bit of overflow here and there. So serious violent cases, maybe somebody will take that's more specialized, but generally speaking, about one deputy prosecutor, one staff person working over there. And our detention continues to be very low. The population in detention is very low. So of all the caseloads I've talked about, my personal feeling and impression is that the juvenile is the most manageable right now. If that answers your question, Commissioner.
It does. Thank you. Are there any additional questions, County Manager?
Not necessarily a question, maybe following up to what Commissioner Mentor stated related to the data subcommittee of the Law and Justice Council. When the discussion was made at the Law and Justice Council maybe a few months ago, we knew the task of that subcommittee was going to be huge. There's going to be costs involved and everything else. As you implement your data dashboard, I think having that in mind and having Leah be part of that process, I think is going to help the system in the long term.
Yeah.
So it's more of a plea and a request and more than a question.
Yeah.
Because I believe all of us are, at least from my point of view, invested in having this data subcommittee be successful at the region, at the system wide, and if there's an opportunity to bank on what are you planning to do, great.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. The biggest benefit about the project here, from the standpoint you're talking, is that the grant itself is somewhere around $300,000 for that startup process for the contract with Measures for Justice and to build and stand up the initial dashboards. But I see that as nothing more than a springboard to go exactly what the vision of the bigger group is, and that is if we get experience building these dashboards, we get a kind of a framework put together, what that looks like, and build the web part of it. That's all work that's being done under the funding of this grant. So it seems like that becomes a nice foundation then on which we build. And that's where the Law and Justice Subcommittee can start thinking about what are the other things that we could add. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we're going on the process of updating our web pages and the whole system. And making sure that we connect the dots on that will be good. So, we don't miss an opportunity to make it successful.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions, comments?
Commissioner Edwards, any additional questions?
No, I think we got her covered. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, it is 9:56. Thank you, Prosecutor Thunheim, for joining us today and giving us the information. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.